the Florida Panthers were just on the brink of becoming, a laughing stock to the sports community for years to come, as they had a 3-0 series lead in the Stanley Cup Finals and almost let it slip away. But last night was an incredible performance from them in my eyes. I know that a lot of people are sort of putting this on the Oilers for their lack of execution, but the Panthers, in my eyes, were the best team headed into the playoffs, and they continued to show why as they got back to their identity a little bit more, ramping up the aggression once again, that forecheck that has been so prolific for them for a number of months here. You can even go back to last year as well, and they sort of leaned on that to be able to pull this one out. And now the Panthers are NHL champions for the first time in the franchise's history. So in order for the Panthers to sort of redirect the momentum of this series, whether or not you believe in momentum in playoff series like these, you knew they were going to need to get production from their top goal scorers, and that's what they got with both Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Reinhart, who were able to step up in big moments to put the Panthers ahead. The Verhaeghe goal came as the first in the game in that first period, where he was able to put in a really nice redirection off of an Evan Rodriguez shot, and Rodriguez, that was really his only super notable, I would say, moment of the game. But Rodriguez was incredible throughout this entire series, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for this, although it's going to, fall a little bit lower on the totem pole in terms of where credit is due for the Panthers to win this series. But again, they had sort of just fallen out of their game from a physicality standpoint. They weren't able to put bodies on the other teams, disrupt Edmonton quite as much as they were in the first few games, and that was clearly a point of emphasis for Paul Maurice and his team. But again, also, it's about big players stepping up in the key moments, and Verhaeghe and Reinhart, who had both gone scoreless since Game 3 of this series, were both able to come up in massive moments for them, and it made all the difference. Like I mentioned, Verhaeghe goal sort of started it off right, and then Reinhart in the second period was able to score what went on to be the game winner in that second period, where he was coming down the ice in transition. You saw the Oilers sort of collapse back towards the net, and Sam Reinhart, it was a little reminiscent for me of the overtime goal he had in what I believe was Game 5 or Game 4 of the Rangers series, where he had the overtime winner, and he was just able to sort of comfortably get into his spot and just let it rip. This is somebody who scored 57 goals in the regular season, and we know how prolific of a scorer he is when he gets his opportunities, and that was all the space that he needed to get this one to go. Just got it under Stuart Skinner's goal. Give Carter Verhaeghe some credit as well. I believe he was the one who was screening Skinner on that play as well. So the two of them were just absolutely massive for them. But of course, none of this Panthers run is really able to take place if it wasn't for the play of Sergei Bobrovsky, who now at 35 years old, the two-time Vezina trophy winner, is a world champion. So you have to feel good for Sergei Bobrovsky, who it felt like to some degree, and we're going to get into the debate in terms of the Conn Smythe, he sort of fumbled that away with some poor performances in games 4, 5, and 6. But in this game, he did absolutely everything he needed to find his groove once again. And again, the job that he did throughout the entirety of this postseason cannot go without recognition. And now Bobrovsky, who, is coming into the final years likely of his career, is able to have this shining moment where, again, the Panthers are absolutely not in this position without him. So you have to give him a ton of credit. But as much credit as he deserves. I think that this was also in large part about the fact that this Florida Panthers defense is one of the best units that we've seen in the NHL for a couple years now. In this game, 17 block shots, 32 hits. Like I mentioned, they sort of found their way into refining their identity of, we are going to fly around this ice, we're going to make things extremely difficult for you to set up, and we're going to try and take you out of your zone. And they were absolutely tested, where there were a number of instances in both the second period and the third period where they were sort of, I wouldn't quite say reeling necessarily, but there were a number of instances where we see how good the puck movement is for the Oilers in this offense that they have, that there were a number of times where they were running a minute plus into the time of possession in the offensive zone and had the Florida defense on their heels a little bit, but they never backed off, and they were able to shut down all of those types of opportunities. In the third period, there were a couple of different instances where we saw around the 7-minute mark, Sergei Bobrovsky was down on the ice, and McDavid had the puck at the goal line. It seemed like it was going to be a golden opportunity for him to put the puck in the net, but he couldn't get a shot off. He dumps it off to Hyman, and then Bobrovsky dives out there. Tons of bodies crashing back as well to sort of help put pressure on Edmonton as their goalie was in a compromising situation. And then with about 4 minutes left, Bobrovsky again, he ends up getting knocked over on the play, and he had lost his stick too. He's diving everywhere trying to recover, but never really seemed in control of that moment. But it didn't matter because of the fact that the Florida defense was just everywhere, swarming the Oilers on that possession, and they never even got a shot on net there. And there was an incredible Eetu Luostarinen blocked shot in there as well. So I think that their defense deserves just as much credit as Bobrovsky. Again, this was a very complete Panthers team in my eyes, and they are definitely deserving of this. And, even when you look at Reinhart's goal, it came off of a defensive stop at that point late in the second period. It was turning into a little bit of a track meet, just both teams skating up and down the ice, and it was the job of, it might have been Kulikov, I think, that sort of swiped the puck away when Bobrovsky had come out of the net a little bit more, and then that ultimately started the break down the ice that got Reinhart the look on the breakaway. So, I just think that this Panthers team was so resilient to have their backs up against the wall, and obviously, it's one thing for whatever it's worth of, losing out on a championship, but they would have become the laughingstock of the entire sports world to some degree, for years from now because of blowing a 3-0 lead in the finals, but instead they come out victorious. And you have to feel great for head coach Paul Maurice, where he has had quite a lengthy career as a head coach in the NFL. He got his first gig in 1995. He has seen lots of ups and downs throughout his career. Actually, the most losses from any coach in NHL history. Has been fired 3 times, and it just seemed like it was this full circle moment for him, where my favorite moment of the night was when he was able to first get his hands on the cup, and he lifts it up, and it looked like he just took a second, sort of closed his eyes, took the moment in, and then just exploded with a couple swears in there and was just celebrating, and it was really awesome to see. So you have to feel good about it from that perspective. I am a Bruins fan, and I openly said I'm rooting for the Oilers in this, but I don't know, there is something to be said for, I felt good for the Panthers, the fact that they were able to avoid this catastrophe, and they did so by playing some of the hardest hockey that we have seen in the postseason. I thought it was just very indicative of the type of team that this is. They understood all the battle scars, even going back to last year's Stanley Cup Finals, and they deserve this to come away with it. I believe the best team in the NHL was rightly crowned this year. So very briefly here on the Oilers, it's tough. Again, a lot of people are sort of saying that this was a missed opportunity for them. I would prefer to look at it from the Panthers' perspective of they absolutely earned this one, but it was, some interesting decisions along the way. I think one of the biggest things that they're getting questioned for this morning is Knobloch's decision to play that first line really heavy minutes during the third period, because by the time that, and obviously you understand, you have nothing else to lose necessarily, you're already in game 7, there is no tomorrow, it's all or nothing, but I feel like by the end of it, you could see the Oilers went to pull Stuart Skinner out of goal with like a minute and a half, 2 minutes left, and by that point all of Edmonton's skaters were just so gassed, and you could see they never really got a solid handle in the zone during that time with the man advantage. Connor McDavid is falling down at mid-ice trying to just leave it all out there, but it was just too much by that point. McDavid, like I mentioned, extremely heavy minutes in this one, played the, over half of the third period, so I think that ultimately, this is, to some degree, I feel like the majority of America was probably rooting, and of course all of Canada was rooting for the Oilers in this to pull off history. But again, I don't think that by any means this is the wrong team came out on top. And, again, biases aside and everything, I feel like this ultimately ended up as one of the almost perfect results, really, with the best team winning the cup and the best player in the league getting recognized on a national stage as Connor McDavid won the Conn Smythe Trophy, which does not happen very often, of course, coming to a player that was on the losing side of the Stanley Cup Finals. And that's what we're going to dive into next, is the debate as to whether or not the voters got it right on that end. So we are going to dive into that debate, but first, taking a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.